Welcome to the DFMI Business Lab podcast, brought to you by the Durban Film Art Institute, presented in partnership with DW Academy, supported by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. DFMI Business Lab podcast draws inspiration from the 18-week online program which focuses on the business elements of filmmaking, aimed at equipping film producers with the skills to grow their careers. Our host today is Khosie Dali, who is an alumni of the DFMI Business Lab.
Welcome everyone to the DFMI podcast. And today's episode, we're going to be chatting about fundraising with Toni Monty. My name is Khosie Dali. I'm an independent film producer based in Cape Town. I produce commercials, feature films, and short films as well. Toni, I'm very excited to be chatting with you today. Can you please tell us a little bit about your background and about yourself, and then we'll get straight into it.
Great. Thanks, Khosie. Nice to be here today. Thanks for having me. I've been roaming around the industry for some time. I think probably around about 30 years now. My most recent history that some may know is I headed up the Durban Film Art for 11 years, actually, together with the Durban International Film Festival. We started the Durban Film Art. And then parallel to that, I was heading up the Durban Film Office, which is the city's development arm for the film industry. I was there for 17 years. And obviously during that time spent a lot of time working with aspiring filmmakers and developing various projects and programs to advance filmmakers. And that's ultimately where the Durban Film Art came from. And kind of where we came up with the idea for it, because we were looking at the plight of filmmakers, specifically in Durban, but generally in South Africa, and the challenges that they were facing in terms of access to market. We already had a long-standing film festival, internationally recognized film festival, and we wanted to look at how we could add a business element to that, to provide a platform for filmmakers for our South African filmmakers. Initially, that was the idea, to network with the rest of the world. But as we kind of got into it, we also then realized that what is desperately needed is, in fact, for African filmmakers to be networking with each other. And so that's kind of where the concept came from, and we built it out from there. But really, during that period, the 11 years at Durban Film Art, 17 years at the Durban Film Office, I worked and created a lot of funding programs, a lot of development programs, and got to see firsthand what was happening, not just with Durban filmmakers, not just with South African filmmakers, but with African filmmakers, kind of how they were engaging with the marketplace, how they were presenting themselves in the marketplace, and the challenges that they were experiencing. And specifically with Durban Film Arts, I really got to get a bird's eye view of what those challenges were, and where African filmmakers were kind of falling down when they were presenting themselves in the marketplace. And so now I spend a lot of time developing materials over and above actually working in the industry, and doing a bit of executive producing on the side. I spend a lot of time developing materials to really assist African filmmakers to kind of make that leap. I think the Durban Film Art has done incredible work in creating that bridge, but there still seems to be a bit of a skills gap, and an understanding of particularly how finance works in the industry. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's me.
Yes, I love it. Thank you so much, Toni. And I mean, as a filmmaker myself, I find fundraising as one of the most challenging parts of production. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this. And you have said that you have been in the development space for over 25 years. And you also mentioned that you've been watching the African filmmakers and you've seen some of their challenges. Can you tell us more about that? What are those challenges that are facing? And in your perspective, what do you think is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years, especially in the African context? Or what should be changing?
So I think, first, when you talk about the African context, we have to talk about the global context, and I think that's the important thing. We can't talk about the African context without talking about the global context, because most filmmakers, what they're trying to do, and what they should be trying to do, is getting their projects into the global marketplace. And so what is the connect, or what is the disconnect between what African filmmakers are doing, and the global marketplace? I think over kind of the last 10 years, we've seen quite a dramatic change, and I think the Durban Film Art has contributed largely to this, as well as other African partners in the marketplace. But I think we've seen quite a dramatic change in terms of how African filmmakers are accessing the global market, how they're being accepted in the global market. And we certainly have seen a dramatic increase in that kind of market penetration, in African storytelling being recognized in the global market, but more than recognized, where they are sought. Where African storytelling, where the global market is looking for African storytelling. And I think that is great, and I think it's fantastic news. The last 10 years, from a finance perspective, globally, there's been a number of challenges, there's been a number of changes. The market is still continuing to change. I think 10 years ago, we saw a lot more of kind of equity finance, of pre-sales. But now, kind of 10 years on, we're leaning more towards a more kind of hybrid funding model that we kind of need to look at, if we want to get our films financed, because the markets are constrained. Obviously, we had the kind of rush for the streamers. Even the streamers have been constrained in the last couple of years. So certainly things are changing. It's important for African filmmakers to keep abreast of this. And this is something that I always say to the filmmakers that I work with, that I talk to. You need to do your research. You need to keep up to date with what's happening in the marketplace. But just going back to the challenges that you're asking, well, what are these things? What are these gaps? The main thing that I'm seeing with African filmmakers really is just not understanding the basics of film finance. And I think it can be very overwhelming, especially when you're sitting in a meeting with a potential investor and they're using a lot of buzzwords, and these buzzwords are going over your head. It's almost like speaking a completely different language. And you have no idea how to respond, because you have no idea what they're talking about or what they're asking about. And some of these things are actually very basic. There are some basic fundamentals to understand, and if you can get to grips with that, you can build on that, and you will actually build those skills. It can get very complicated. Obviously, film finance can get very complicated, but at a very base level, it's not that complicated to understand. That's the kind of work that I'm busy doing, is really trying to open up that language with filmmakers. Yeah.
Okay. And then also with filmmakers starting out, how should they start thinking about the different sources of funding, like the grants and the private equity and the broadcasters and the streamers? That question, and also you touched upon equity and the different types of funding. Can you just explain a little bit more about that? Like, for example, I know in the States mostly they don't have like grants and things like that. They're mostly about equity. Can you just tell us the difference between the two and how to approach those?
Sure. So I think, at a basic level, you're talking about soft funding, what we call soft funding, which generally comes in the form of some kind of a grant, whether it be a government grant, or a grant from a non-profit organization, Film Institute, funding, film funding organizations. And that kind of soft funding generally is what we call non-recoupable. Generally, there are some funds where it is in fact recoupable, but that's more unusual. For the most part, when you're looking at kind of grant funding or soft funding, incentives, etc., it's non-recoupable, meaning that when you finally complete the project and you take the project to market, and the project starts making money in the marketplace, you don't have to pay those people back. You don't have to pay those organizations back. On the opposite end of the spectrum is what we call equity financing. And these are investors. These are investors who are looking for a return on their investment. And so when they put money into your project, they are going to expect you to pay them back. Once the project is in the marketplace and making money, they're going to expect you to pay them back. They'll put a premium on that as well. So it's not just pay them back what they gave you. They want a return on their investment. So you're going to have to pay back a little bit extra, and generally there's some other bits and pieces that'll come into that deal. But the principle of it is that these are business people, these are investors. They are wanting to get a return on investment. So they are investing in your project so that they can make a little bit of money back on the project. They're not doing it because they love your story, or they think you're a great filmmaker. They're doing it because if they do it, they think that the project has potential to actually make money in the marketplace.
And
That
then
cover
when you
your
talk,
questions?
it does, it really does. And then when you talk about these business people, these investors, what are they looking for exactly? You mentioned that it's not just about you and the story. Yes, you have to have a nice story and have some experience. But what are they actually looking for in that initial meeting? What do you need to say? What do they need to hear?
So, I mean, there's a lot that we can talk about, and we don't have enough time in this podcast. But very simply, what they are looking for is a project that has what we say has been de-risked to a level. And by de-risk meaning that it has a greater chance of actually doing something in the marketplace. I think, conversations among filmmakers, experienced filmmakers who've been in this industry for decades, they'll say to you, films don't make money. It's not entirely true. There are a lot of films that don't make money at all, but it's not entirely true that films don't make money. What an investor is looking at, and what they want to hear from you, and we can talk a little bit about how we break that down. How do you actually let them know that your project has been de-risked? But what they want to assess is how risky is this project? If they put their money into it, what are the chances of them getting anything back within the next 5 years? That's what they want to know. How risky is the project? Film is a risky business. And people who invest in film, equity investors who invest in film, they know their business well, and they know how to assess whether or not this project has any chance of them making a return on their investment. But ultimately, that's what they're after.
I love that. And do you think co-productions are still like one of the strongest vehicles for financing, or are there other new models that are emerging? Other options to look at?
Absolutely. I mean, I said earlier that, we've moved from a space where previously, maybe 10 years ago, there was a lot more equity investment available. There was a lot more pre-sales available, even minimum guarantees available. And this space has kind of closed up a bit. And there's various reasons for that. But the market, certainly that part of the market is certainly contracted. And so we're in a space now where if you need to get your project into the marketplace, you need to kind of look at a hybrid financing model. And what I always say is that the best place to start with that is to start with soft money, because you want to build credibility. Generally now, if we look at the model now, any kind of equity financing that you manage to bring into your project is normally towards the end of your financing kind of run, and it'll be a smaller percentage than anything else. But those equity investors, because they're looking at the risk, if they can see that the project already has credibility in the marketplace, meaning It's been to a number of labs. It's been selected to a number of labs. It's managed to secure some funds, some soft funds. It's managed to actually get some government grants. That already shows that there's some confidence in the project, and that obviously goes a long way to assisting the investor in understanding the level of risk. Now, when you talk about co-productions are absolutely still as important as they have always been, because co-productions, when we talk about co-productions, essentially talking about two different things. You're talking about a potential of a treaty co-production, which is a kind of country to country co-production based on a treaty. It's a government to government treaty, or a more informal co-production where it's just between two producers across two different territories. Either way, both of those models open up opportunities between those two territories. So if I am co-producing from South Africa into Germany or into Canada, there are various things that open up to me in order that I can access, various funding schemes within Canada or Germany that now this production can access, and vice versa. I think that's the first obvious value of a co-production. The other value of a co-production, and especially for African filmmakers, first and second time African filmmakers, is access to resources and skills. So a lot of first and second time African filmmakers don't yet have the level of credibility that is needed to access certain international funds. And it can be helpful to onboard, to bring on a co-producer from even within your own territory, but it can be helpful to bring on a co-producer who has the required set of skills to take that project forward. That's also a very useful space for co-productions. So certainly co-productions are very important. Are there new models? There are new models emerging all the time. Right now, the world is changing very quickly with artificial intelligence. I think we all know that, and we're going to definitely see some big changes over the next 10 years. Who can predict what those changes are? It's anybody's guess right now.
So true. I want to chat a bit about building relationships in the networks. With festivals and markets like DFMI, how can they help filmmakers access this funding opportunities? And also maybe if we have an opportunity to chat some potential investors, how do we keep those relationships, and what advice do you have for building long-term trust with these funders?
Sure. So let's first start talking about relationships. I always say that we're not in the industry we're working in. We are not fundraising. We are raising relationships. And in fact, it's relationships that raise funding. And I mean, networking in any business is critical, but it's in our business, it is absolutely essential. Building a strong network, it can take years to do. Learning how to network, learning how to maintain that network is critical. You will use those people in your network, you will access those people in your network for so many different reasons, on so many different levels, over the years and years of your career. So it's very important to focus that as part of your business strategy, is building a network, but also maintaining that network. So you've got to be very clever about maintaining it, and constantly dipping back into it, even if you've got nothing to offer it. Just constantly make yourself visible so that people can see you. This is very important. Visibility is very, very important in our industry, which brings me to something like the DFMI, the Durban Film Art, and any market, any platform that is offering an opportunity for filmmakers to come in, to pitch their projects, to listen to experts, to meet up with what I call trusted advisors, build a network, is incredibly important for our industry. It really is, because especially now, I think post-COVID, we're all working on, we're still now all working on digital meetings, Zoom, and teams, and we're still, and that's fine. We can run the engine of our industry on that, but we do need that face to face. At least once or twice a year, a filmmaker must make sure that because that visibility is important. So must make sure that they are making an effort and building it into their business plan, that they are attending at least one or two platforms a year, to build up that visibility. That's the first thing. The second thing is that when you look at these labs, especially if you are officially selected, not just labs, but also festivals where you are officially selected, those labs and festivals, in fact, become ambassadors of your brand, on so many different levels. Um, I got a call the other day, from when I was at Durban Film Art, from one of our international partners, and they were looking for a particular project that they had awarded a prize to, I don't know, 10 years ago. And I had to tell them obviously that I'm no longer with the Durban Film Art, and I put them in touch with the Durban Film Art. But those records, they have records of your participation. Um, it increases your visibility. And then somebody like, an organization like the Durban Film Art, is promoting your brand during, and post that period of the actual market and ongoing. I mean, we know about, DFM alumni, etc. So the bottom line is that, these festivals and markets, as you participate in them, almost become brand ambassadors for you. So it's just that added, very important opportunity to ensure that you are making yourself visible.
I can totally agree with that, Tony. I remember in my career, I started off in like 2019, and I had my first pitch at DFM. And since then until now, my network has just grown and grown and grown locally and internationally. So like, yeah, it's very
It's a game
important to know
changer.
that it really, really is. What else? Oh, sorry. Guys, please cut this out. I've lost my train of thought. Sorry, okay. Sorry, Tony. And then I just wanted to ask, there's cultural and diplomatic organizations. You get embassies, you get film institutes and consulate. What role do these play in financing your film?
So almost a similar role to what markets and festivals are playing. They almost become brand ambassadors for you. I know, from all my years at the Durban Film Office and the Durban Film Art, where we dealt with these consulates and these institutes, and that they keep an eye on what's happening. And they keep track of what's happening with filmmakers. And if they see, filmmakers who have done good work at networking with these organizations and stayed in contact with them and kept themselves visible, there will be times where something happens, where a particular program is happening, and they have to look for 10 filmmakers from Africa to come over there and be part of the program. Or that's why the visibility is important, because if you are visible to them, you will be on their list and they will make contact with you. And then you get drawn into these programs, and they're incredible opportunities to promote yourself and, of course, any projects that you're taking along with you. So, they don't necessarily have a direct role in film finance. But certainly they have an indirect role in really promoting your brand. Of course, at a very high level, when we talk about consulates and the intergovernmental conversations that are happening there to promote African filmmakers and African brand in territories off the continent, they play a role there too. But that's not as relevant to filmmakers on the ground as saying to you, make sure that you are visible. These organizations generally are in attendance at these events. They certainly are in attendance at the Durban Film Art. Make yourself visible, make yourself known, because they can be very valuable to you in your network.
And if you can give some advice, Tony, to some young filmmakers that are feeling so overwhelmed and just a bit scared by the fundraising process. What would you say?
I think the first thing that I always say is you need to spend some time doing research. I find a lot of filmmakers, when they are developing their packages for market, they almost do it in a silo, within a silo kind of mentality. They don't go out and actually look at other similar projects in the market, and look at who funded them, who distributed them, what did their finance plan look like, what territories did they manage to actually pick up any sales, what was their budget like, although budgets aren't generally published publicly, but you can get a sense of what that budget looks like. If you do enough research and you do enough digging, you'll get a good sense of how they did it, basically. And I do find that a lot of filmmakers I speak to that don't do this work, they don't do this research. The whole concept of film finance, as I said earlier, is really not as complicated as it sounds. It sounds complicated because people who are in the know and who have experience doing it use a lot of buzzwords that you don't understand, and so that you just feel like you're sitting on the outside, like you don't actually know what is going on here, what are they talking about, and you don't want to look silly by asking because you're trying to be impressive, but at the same time you're lost and you feel like this is a lost opportunity now because I don't know how to respond, I don't know how to engage in this conversation, I'm not visible. So those basic film finance fundamentals, spending more time looking at comparable projects and just generally what is happening in the world in terms of film finance, and getting yourself up to speed, and getting yourself up to speed with the lingo, and these buzzwords, what do they mean? If somebody uses a buzzword and you don't know what it means, go and find out. And don't just read up a definition. Go and find out, and then find out how it works as a mechanism in the film finance space. I don't think it's necessary for first, second time filmmakers to feel overwhelmed by this whole film finance thing. Yes, there are levels of film financing that are very complicated, but it's probably, as a first or second time filmmaker, probably not the level that you're going to be working at right now anyway. So you shouldn't be overwhelmed. What you should be is challenged. You should be challenged to go out and actually figure it out. Specifically, this is a message to producers. That is your job. Your job is to actually get your head around it and actually make it work for you. But I can honestly say it's not as complicated as it sounds. So go out there, do some research, spend some time looking at case studies, get a good understanding, get to grips with film finance.
I think a common thread through the different podcasts and the episodes is that research is really important. So yeah, people must go down and ask questions and find out how things work. Toni, this has been very insightful. We don't have enough time to unpack everything as much as I'd love to. But is there any last words, anything you'd like to say just to wrap things up from your side?
Probably just to say, and ending off on that last point that we had, the one thing that I did want to say is that, especially to first and second time filmmakers, where it all seems overwhelming, is also try and identify in your space, in your network, what I call trusted advisors. Don't take advice from everybody. Find trusted advisors, people that you kind of align to, that you're in sync with, that you feel that you understand each other, people who have more experience than you, and people who don't mind leaning on leaning on them every now and again to try and unpack something or to try and understand something. Create yourself a room of trusted advisors that you can tap into every now and again to ask a question. I have filmmakers who use me as their trusted advisor. I can't be everybody's trusted advisor, but because there's just not enough time in the day. But I do have some filmmakers who do tap into me, and I don't mind, and there are people out there in the world who don't mind. Obviously, as long as you don't abuse their time, that they don't mind if you call them up, once a month and go, I've got a couple of questions to ask you. I'm not understanding how this works. Do you mind explaining it to me? Find those trusted advisors. And when you do find those trusted advisors, listen, talk less, listen more. Your opportunity to talk will come. But when you are in the room with someone who has more experience with you, has more experience, when you have a trusted advisor, you don't need to pretend to be clever. You can just be. That's what trusted advisors
Just
are.
listen.
And just listen, and learn. That would be my last message.
Thank you. I love that. And on a very, very last note, what are you up to at the moment? What are you doing? And what can we look out for in your world?
So many things. We have just finished a film called God's Work, which made a bit of a noise at Durban Film Art this year
Yes,
and the
it
Durban
did.
International Film
Congratulations on
Festival.
that.
Thank you. And we are busy with the international festival circuit now. So hopefully some good things are going to happen there. But of course, we have now arrived at a point that not arrived at the point, we arrived at the point when we were finishing off God's Work, where we need to onboard new projects. So we are in the process of doing exactly that. Onboarding some new and interesting projects that you will see out in the world. When
You
I say
soon.
out in the world, out in the marketplace, being pitched at the marketplace, because it takes anything 2 to 5 years to get that project
Yep.
financed. That's the
Yep.
reality of it. And that's the last thing that I actually want to say to our young filmmakers. Don't arrive at the market with a project and say that you're going to be shooting this in 6 months, because everybody knows that that's not true. When you don't have a cent, we know it's not true. So don't trip yourself up. We know how this game works. And when you go out into the world and you say you're at the market, you're pitching and you're saying, well, it's July now, we're going to be shooting in January, the person listening to you is just going, oh, right, is it? Okay. You don't have any funding in place. You're here asking me for money. I don't even know your project yet and whether I want to get involved in it. And certainly, even if I did, I wouldn't be putting all the money in. You still have to go out and actually find other money elsewhere. So yeah, don't trip yourself up like that. Nobody's going to believe you, and nobody will say, they won't say anything. They'll just nod and wave, and then and go on to the next cocktail. So be honest and be realistic. There's no need for puffery. I know Hollywood is all about puffery. There's no need for puffery in our industry. Be honest, be realistic, be strategic, and plan things out. Certainly don't arrive and say that you're going to be shooting in 6 months, because that's going to happen, and we all know that. Everybody knows that. Anyway, so I'm saying we've got a couple of interesting projects on the horizon, and we will be out there in the marketplace. I have a team that I'm working with, and they will be out there in the marketplace in the not too distant future, pitching their hearts out to get those projects
Amazing.
financed. But in a nutshell, that is what I'm up to.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Toni. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
so much,
sharing your
Khosie.
experience with us, and wishing you all the best with your future endeavors, and we'll look out for the next projects.
Thanks, Khosie. It's been lovely talking to you, and all the best to you as well. And I'll see you out there in the marketplace.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Cheers, Khosie. Bye.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you learned something new, or that you felt compelled to further interrogate your professional practice. Never miss an episode. Find us wherever you get your podcasts, or sign up to filmart.africa for exclusive video content from this episode, where the African film industry unites.